All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred here with Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
How's it going, Jerred?
It's going well. And we have Dr. Chris Morrissey. How's it going, man?
Hey, good. How you guys doing?
Doing really
Good.
well. Glad to have you here. We mentioned this a long time ago, or I don't even know if we mentioned it publicly, but we did in the group for sure have an Ask the Doc kind of post. And if you wanted to ask, a very qualified doctor in our community questions, people submitted a bunch of questions, and we're finally getting to publish this information and record it. So first off, thank you very much for your time and for agreeing to do this. I think it's awesome. And second off, I'll just throw in a disclaimer. This is for informational purposes only, even though we do have a qualified physician here. He doesn't know anything about your specific case or anything like that. So, we're really just getting some really good information. If you feel like you have some sort of medical issue that does need to be seen by a physician, then definitely, go get that checked out.
For sure.
But I'll throw it to you real fast for an intro. You've been on the podcast before. You and I have worked together a bunch over the years. So, but for anyone who wants to catch up, if we do a quick intro, and then I'll get into the questions that the community submitted.
Sure. So for anybody that doesn't know, my name is Chris Morrissey. I live in Winfield, Kansas. I've been grad gym athlete for about 3 years now, I think. I have, like Jerred said, I've been on the podcast a couple of times. I am a general surgeon in Winfield. I also work in the emergency room every Monday night. I also run our wound center here, and I work at the medical spa also. So I do a little bit of everything. But anyway, I was pretty excited when Jerred brought this up. I think it's really cool, and there's a lot of good questions that we're going to talk about. So pretty anxious to be doing this for you guys. So
awesome. Let's get into it. Well, one of the questions submitted was how to find a doctor who gets us. So, and I think that's a good question, because I've seen a lot of doctors over the years, and it has been difficult to find the right kind. And so I'll let you talk about that.
Sure. So before I kind of answer this specific question, I feel that I kind of wanted to talk about a few of the different types of physicians that you may or may not see. And I know we've mentioned a few on the podcast before, but so the main two types of conventional physicians, there's the DO, which is doctor of osteopathy, which is what I did. And there's also MD, which is a doctor of medicine. I can talk about me specifically. So both MDs and DOs go to medical school for 4 years, and then you decide what you want to do for your specialty. So then you go on to residency for anywhere from 3 to 5 years. MDs and DOs can both specialize in any type of medicine, from family practice, general surgery, cardiothoracic surgery. You can do anything with either of those degrees. So there's really not a whole lot of difference. The big difference between DOs and MDs is we also learn orthopedic manipulation in medical school. So we have a little bit of like chiropractic type stuff to make it simple. And I actually did an extra year. I spent a year of medical school extra doing a fellowship just doing manipulation. So I actually took 5 years of medical school. And so I use a lot of manipulation in my practice on my patients and people that I work with and everything. So I really like it. It's, more of a holistic approach, I guess, to the body, from a function standpoint and everything like that. So those are the two types of conventional physicians that you may see. Now, there's also been mentioned of like functional medicine, which is sort of a newer thing. And that's kind of more of like a systems-based biological approach to kind of focus and identify the root cause, and not just given medications to help with things. That really, a lot of biochemical processes, a lot of enzymes and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of alternative medical care that really focuses on, there's like a bunch of pillars, like between exercise, sleep, good nutrition. There's a bunch of different diet plans that can be prescribed also. And I recently discovered functional medicine. It's been mentioned on the podcast a few times, but the more I learned about it, the more I really like it. And I actually enrolled. I'm currently doing an online fellowship in functional medicine. So hopefully within a year or two, I'll be able to actually implement some of this in my practice. For me personally, the reason I really wanted to do it is because, being a general surgeon, people come to me with abdominal complaints, and I do the normal, I'll, take a good history and physical, and I usually end up doing endoscopy. and or maybe doing a gallbladder surgery. And if that doesn't work, then it's like, well, okay, then you got to go figure it out from somebody else. But with this, I feel I can incorporate this into my practice also, that, you know, looking more of, you know, especially with things that are preached here as far as good nutrition, good sleep, and, you know, stress reduction, all that stuff. So I'm going to really starting to implement that in my practice as well. One other physician you may come across is something called a naturopathic or an ND, and they usually are like in a primary care setting, and they use a lot of kind of mind, body, spirit type of things. They really don't prescribe prescriptions a whole lot. It's more of natural, you know, alternatives, supplements and things like that, and herbs and everything. So it's a little more out there than regular functional medicine, but that's something else that people may come across. Now, to answer the specific question about how to find a doctor that gets us, it's really hard. There's not like a database of physicians that say, hey, this is, you know, I like exercise and I do this stuff. So it's sort of like a word of mouth type of thing. So, you know, asking people around your community. There's a couple of things on Facebook. I'm actually, when I started doing CrossFit stuff, there's a CrossFit physicians group on Facebook that actually I feel would probably be something more along the lines that people could find that just really is into exercise and fitness. A sports medicine physician may be okay. Also, they're like usually orthopedic surgeon background or sometimes family medicine, where you do an extra year fellowship in sports medicine. So, but unfortunately, you know, we're really good at treating acute disease, but when we comes down to the really important things in life, like diet, exercise, and nutrition, conventional physicians, we're not trained very well in that. And so, you know, people is like, hey, you know, I go to the doctor, they told me to quit working out. And so it's like, well, you need, you know, so there's people out there, you just have to find them. And it's really hard sometimes, but, you know, just keep looking and keep, you know, finding somebody. You'll find somebody that'll get you what you want in that aspect. So
yeah, and just a little bit like my history with medical professionals is, you're right. I do feel like functional medicine, you know, is a newer thing, but a long time ago, I just tried to find a doctor who was also some sort of an athlete. And I'd always find like this doctor who is like a triathlete or something. And I'd be like, okay, perfect. You and I are going to work together because you at least understand the athletic side of this, and you're not going to think I'm crazy for training or anything like that. And then recently, when I am searching out a doctor, it's been functional medicine, and it has been very different because you can run into some sort of issue and they don't typically start with a prescription. They'll give you like a diet elimination plan or something like that.
Yep.
It's not that they won't prescribe something. It's not their first line of defense. That's been my experience so far. So I do think that's been really cool to see. And, you know, as you branch out, and I think with you being an athlete, you have such a great understanding of, you know, how these things work and, you know, the whole picture approach. And I think that's a big part of functional medicine, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get
Cool.
to the second one here. I think that sums it up. I did not know a lot of those different things. And so,
Yeah, like ND and stuff. That was interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I don't know, it's just, if you don't research it much, you really don't know. And, you know, doctors that you go to, you really probably wouldn't know if they're an MD versus DO. And I didn't know a lot about it growing up. And once I figured out the two differences when I applied to medical school, DO really fit me more than MD. And not that, you know, there's bad DOs, there's great MDs, you know, it doesn't make you a person. It's just your title and what you do with it is kind of dictates who you are. So
yeah, what I feel that is true, and this is just my personal opinion of any profession out there, it's the pursuit of the craft after the schooling is done that really makes the biggest difference. You know, not someone who went to medical school and then they just rely on, like, I went to medical school, listen to me, which I feel like I've seen those doctors before, but I feel like they haven't read a paper or like done anything past their baseline education. And you typically know when you talk to these individuals. So someone like yourself who's currently in a fellowship, when you're only doing that to better yourself, things like that, I think, really set any professional apart from just the baseline education.
absolutely.
All right. Second question. This is a fun one. How to deal with squats or lower body exercises with hemorrhoids?
This was asked a couple of different times actually, so I felt this was a really good question. Uh, Before we talk about the actual question, just a little bit of background or some backside information, so to speak. So hemorrhoids are basically little, no pun intended. Hemorrhoids are basically like little vascularized cushions. They're basically like big veins that are kind of around where the rectum area is. And basically there's two types, there's internal and external. The internal ones, they kind of line the very inside of the anus, and there's kind of three separate cushions when we talk about them. There's we use it like a clock. So if you're laying on your back, the front part is 12 o'clock, the back side is 6 o'clock. So there's like a left lateral, a right anterior, and a right posterior cushion. And so they can kind of come out in a couple different areas. They typically don't hurt as much. External are usually more painful. Internal are just like uncomfortable. Symptoms that people sometimes describe as a lot of itching, or you just feel like you're not clean. Still feel like you're sitting on a lump or a ball. But they can be very painful at times as well. But how does these happen? Frequently lifting heavy objects, which is something that we do a lot in this community. Straining when you're trying to have a bowel movement. Sitting on the toilet too long. Actually, I think since smartphones have been invented, I think there's more of them because, people will bring it in there, check your email and play a game. Next thing you know, 30 minutes has gone by. So I usually tell people like, hey, don't bring yourself into the bathroom. You have to read the shampoo bottle like old school or something if you want something to read, because it's just really easy to get lost in that. Also, if people don't drink enough water, they don't have enough fiber in their diet. So if they don't have a very good diet in general, they can cause these. So it is fairly common. So as far as home remedies, what can you do for yourself? Decreasing toilet time is a big one, increasing your fiber in your diet, drinking more water, and more fruits and vegetables in your diet. If you do have them, you can try doing what's called a sitz bath, which is kind of where you soak in a warm tub, just as warm as you can stand it for multiple times a day. That'll kind of help shrink it down a little bit. You can try with the counter pain relievers like Tylenol, ibuprofen, Aleve. There's some over-the-counter creams that you can try, or sometimes you may even need to get a prescription for these. My little spiel on hemorrhoids, people come to me sometimes say, hey, I have them. I want to get rid of them. And I always preach it that it's a horrible thing. I say, this is the most painful thing I do to people. So if I do this to you, usually you'll hate me for 2 weeks. You'll hate my mother for the third week. And you might like me my fourth week again. So it's not a very gentle surgery. It's very brutal, and it's not very hard to do usually. It's just really a lot of pain afterwards. So now one of the things that can happen is you can get what's called a thrombosed external hemorrhoid, which is basically where the blood clots off inside of it, and it is super painful. Like you can't sit, and it feels like there's people describe they're sitting on a basketball, and in theory it's like maybe the size of a nickel or a dime or something, but it's just horribly painful. So those we kind of have to urgently drain. So you just either numb it up or take them to the operating room, put them to sleep, and open the area up to drain and get that blood clot out of there. And you leave a little packing in there to leave it open and let it heal over. So that's kind of more of an urgent treatment if you want to really get that to go away. As far as lifting alterations go, like speaking from personal experience, is TMI, but I've had to deal with this before myself. So doing any real heavy pause squats is something that you can really eliminate from your training regimen. If you're currently having them, or if you've had it in the past, I probably wouldn't do them. Anything that's going to really, really increase your intra-abdominal pressure if you're sitting at the bottom of a squat with 225 on your back, like that's all the pressure goes right there. So I would not recommend doing any type of pause squats or any heavy, leg press or anything like that. It's kind of a trial and error. It depends on how you feel. Sitting on a bike probably isn't the best idea either, because you're just sitting. And so you can do, lighter upper body stuff. You can, swimming is great because basically it's virtually no pressure on anything. That's a really good thing to do, and just decrease your weight a whole lot. Like maybe just do air squats and see if that bothers you, and then gradually increase your weights over time. And if it's a recurrent problem, you may have to have a surgery to remove them. But I always encourage, changing your diet, really increasing your fiber intake, really drinking a lot of water, and just backing off on the load. You don't have to stop, but anything that you do that obviously makes it hurt, probably don't do that for a while. So
Yeah, and I'll go TMI as well. So my first time I ever had hemorrhoids, it was actually a very long time ago. Probably I was like 19, 20 years old, something like that. And it was from heavy back squatting. And I really, I was just getting up near maximum lifting or whatever. And I feel like I just didn't know how to strain properly when I was under that type of load. And so I feel
Mhm.
like when you're just trying to do whatever the hell you can to lift the weight up, things get a little bit messy. You might be straining in different areas. And now that's a big reason I like, if you see me fail on a squat, it happens fast. And if you see a video of me doing a max squat, you'll see that it looks fairly easy. It's still difficult for me, but it's fairly easy because I want to keep my strain and my hamstrings and my quads and my hips like muscular only. If I start feeling anything else like abdominal, or I've lost control of that area, like the weight's coming down, because
Yep.
the few times I have had hemorrhoids, it's not a pleasant experience. And for
No.
me, it's generally always been lifting related, and just trying to stay away from them as much as possible. So yeah, also I would just say, don't go for that max effort if you don't know how to strain properly. It's not worth it.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also had them. I've had both of them. So both variations, and I'm pretty sure it was back when I was, early 20s. Didn't really know, haven't been lifting too long, but it was all about lifting as much weight as you can, and moving the weight when it's really that. And I know my form wasn't the best. So if you have them, this may be a good time to do work on form or speed, because speed could also be something that you need to limiting as well. But form for sure. Um, and I'm pretty sure I just went lighter. I backed off on the bro reps, and it went
Mhm.
went away, I
I had
guess.
to ask
Yeah.
my dad what they were. Like I was like, "Am I dying? What is this?" Like he
Um,
just laughed at me. He's like, "Welcome to manhood."
yeah, my mom's a PA, so she's gotten some
uh,
texts from me, and now my sister's also a PA, so I text both of them. I just kind of alternate back and forth if I have something. But that was, yeah, the first time when I had internal, it was a scary moment. I was like, this isn't right, but
All right. Well, let's get to the
yeah.
next one. And this is a big one. I feel like I get this question all the time. And I never feel anywhere close to qualified to answer it. So I'm glad that it's being asked on the podcast. So going to the doctor and requesting blood work, what can I ask for?
And that's a great question. It's kind of a difficult one too, because like it depends on what you're looking for. It depends on how healthy you are. So there's a whole lot of variance. It depends on what, are you wanting to improve your overall well-being, or are you just wanting to see how, globally your labs are if you've never gone to the doctor, if you're like a normal, I don't know, 20s to 40-year-old and you're healthy and you don't go to the doctor unless you need to. So it's kind of hard to know how to answer this question. But like if you came to me and you're like, hey, I just want to know how healthy I am or whatever, kind of the basic thing that you'll get done, and I'll explain these as we go, but something called a CBC, which is a complete blood count, a CMP or a BMP, which is a complete metabolic profile or a basic metabolic profile, the TSAs, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. They may check the T4 and T3 levels, fasting lipid profile, which is like total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, triglyceride levels. If depending on how old you are, they might check something called the hemoglobin A1C, which is a long-term blood sugar test, and I'll explain each of these so people know what they are. If you're a male, they might check like a PSA, which is a prostate-specific antigen. If you're a little bit in the older realm, and also maybe your testosterone level. If you're having joint pain, they may get kind of a shotgun like inflammation markers called the CRP and the ESR or a SED rate. So like on a CBC, I'll kind of backtrack and go through all these. So what that'll entail is you'll get a white blood cell count. It'll check your hemoglobin, which is the iron binding capacity and carrying oxygen throughout your body. A hematocrit, which is kind of a concentration of your blood cells, and so to speak. Your platelet levels, which is what induces clotting for your clotting cascade if you cut yourself or whatever. There's a bunch of other little nuances too, like your lymphocyte count and your neutrophil count, your mean corpuscular volume, or your MCV. There's a whole bunch of acronyms that are used. And the four main ones that most doctors look at is white blood cell count, hemoglobin, hematocrit, and platelets. It just kind of gives you your overall blood cell function. A CMP, which is a complete metabolic profile, is so it's going to check your electrolytes. So sodium, potassium, chloride, carbon dioxide levels, BUN, which is blood urea nitrogen, which is sort of it's a kidney function, creatinine, which is another one we hear about, kidney function, which is completely different from creatine. So it's not like if you're taking creatine, it's completely different. So some people feel it's the same thing. And then you'll look at your liver enzymes, which is your alkaline phosphatase, your total bilirubin, AST and ALT, which are liver enzymes, total protein, albumin levels, your calcium. So that's kind of a global thing with the look out for your electrolytes. So, and then a TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. There's a very complicated axis in your body. You know, you get a signal from your brain, from the pituitary gland that kind of sends a hormone to your thyroid. If it's like a big feedback loop, sort of like a thermostat, air conditioner type scenario. So it's like, hey, your thyroid levels are low, so we need to kick out more thyroid hormone. So it kicks out more of the thyroid stimulating hormone. It goes to the periphery, then it gets converted to the active thyroid hormones. And so that kind of dictates, you know, a lot of your metabolic functions. You know, I know, you know, Ashley's mentioned she has had thyroid issues and is doing things. So some of those acronyms, I think she's probably mentioned before. So that's kind of what that's all about. As far as your lipids go, like a traditional regular medical panel, they'll get a total cholesterol, which is basically the sum of the good and the bad, right? So the LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, the low dense lipoproteins, and then the HDL is the high density. So the higher the HDL, the better. So that's like your, you know, how do you increase your HDL? A lot of times exercise, diet. There's a few supplements like niacin you can take that'll help with that. But some people, a lot of cholesterol problems is genetics, like me personally. The only medication I take that's prescription is I take a statin, which is Crestor. My dad's got high cholesterol, and I've battled high cholesterol for years. You know, I've checked it probably 20 years ago. And when I was working out and dieting and eating well, it was high. When I was a resident eating like crap and not exercising, it was high. And so I just have been tried every which way to manipulate. Actually, that's why I started paleo about 2 years ago, because, you know, the Rob Wolf book talks about that excess carbohydrates actually gets converted to cholesterol at the biochemical level. So I'm like, oh, well, I can lower it. And I actually lowered it by about 40 points on my own, but I figured it was time to be an adult and try to lower it and be more healthy. So that's why I'm on some medication. So I've checked it a few times and it's lowered still. It's still not in great range, but that's kind of the basis of all that. As far as the hemoglobin A1C, that's a lab that's thrown around a lot also. So that is basically an average over 3 months of what your blood sugar is. And so the ideal range for that is about less than 6. And when you start getting in the diabetic realm, depending on what kind of doctor you talk to, it's anywhere between over 6.5 to 7. And so what happens is there's your red blood cells are actually recycled every 3 months. And so that the sugar is tagged to that. And so it looks at a global look at your blood sugar. So like if you get that metabolic profile I mentioned earlier, it'll give you a blood sugar, but at that moment in time. So, you know, if you just ate, you know, donuts and had coffee with sugar or something, it might be like 200. But then if you check it fasting and you haven't eaten, it might be 90. And so it's like, well, am I diabetic because my sugar's over 130? No, it's because you ate right before you got this checked. And so the hemoglobin A1C is an average over 3 months of what it is. So it's a much better test as far as where your blood sugar is and what your metabolically is doing if you're borderline diabetic. The PSA, which is a prostate-specific antigen, it's just a hormone that's released sometimes if your prostate is enlarged, or you know, if you could be developing prostate cancer. So that's kind of a marker that they'll use to screen people looking for that. And then, you know, testosterone level is pretty self-explanatory. The joint pain thing, so the C-reactive protein and the SED rate, or an ESR, that's kind of just a global inflammation in the body. It's not specific to any one disease. You know, people with rheumatoid arthritis, or if you have an infection, if you have appendicitis, these will be elevated in about any inflammatory condition. In the functional medicine world, they may check that just to see if you do have inflammation in your body. And then there's a bunch of other sub-tests to go off of that. So those are kind of the main ones. I don't know if I answered that question however the person asked it, what they were looking for. So it really depends on what you're wanting. But, you know, if you have specific things like, hey, I want to look, you know, see where my lipids are, and there's actually subsets of checking your lipids. where they'll look at the molecule size, and that's actually a little bit more important. But on a conventional, hey, we're going to check your fasting labs, like that's not broken down. You got to go to a specific lab, and I personally haven't figured out where they do those yet, because that's something I'm interested in. Because if you look at your bad cholesterol, but the molecules, like there's different molecule sizes. So if you have the bad cholesterol is elevated, but your molecules are all big, those are basically like, they call them big and fluffy versus small and firm. It's like the big and fluffy ones, they kind of flow through your bloodstream, but they don't clog anything because it's like a beach ball. It just bounces around and it's actually fine. But if the particles are so small, that's where you start getting the peripheral vascular disease, lining the arteries, so to speak, what everybody hears about, the plaque that builds up in your carotids, in your brain, in your heart, in your legs. So that's kind of where that all stems from. So just because your cholesterol is high, it doesn't always mean it's the bad that's really bad. You just got to get that broken down. And that's something I'm looking into to try to figure out where I can do it for myself and also my patients, as far as what kind of high cholesterol, quote unquote, that you have. So.
Yeah, and what I do with blood work is I try to just do it annually unless there's something specific that I want to check. So I do work with a doctor, and the last time I did blood work, the only thing that it was pretty much everything that you mentioned here, I think, was most of the things that we looked at. I don't know if we checked like PSA, or I can't recall testosterone, but I know. And then one of the things that came back, that was my vitamin D was low. That was like one thing that came up, but that was the only. Everything else came back fine. And so I do think what you're saying, if anyone's looking to get blood work, doing something very generalized is the best place to start, because it'll show you, maybe where you need to start diving in more, whether it's with the doctor that prescribed the blood work, or wherever you end up finding out that information, because then it could reveal more. But it's also easy to just never get blood work done. Like if you don't have any sort of medical problem, you go probably a decade and a half before anyone forces you to get blood work done, or quote unquote forces you, or suggests that you should get it. So I think it's good to do on an annual basis. Would you prescribe a frequency more than that, or what would you think?
The only time you'd want to do it more than that, so like if say you've got diagnosed with high cholesterol, and all right, well, depending on how high it is, a lot of times, okay, let's try changing your diet, come back in 3-6 months, we'll recheck it, and see where that goes from there. Because some people can really manipulate their diet if they've been eating completely terrible and they clean it up and they have good genetics so they can do that. Then I would do it more often. Or if you're starting on a medication, you'll want to check it more often, or like supplements. So, like you said, if your vitamin D is low, well, then you'll want to come back and recheck it in 3 to 6 months after being on supplementation, whatever you choose. But I would say globally, if you're a fairly healthy person, annually is probably the maximum that I would do. As far as, I wouldn't probably get it checked any more than that, unless, again, you have specific entities, or your symptomatology changed, or hey, I started this medication, whatever I did, and now I'm feeling different, or I'm having a reaction, or if you're trying to supplement yourself just based off reading things on the internet and you're having complications from that, I suppose. But yeah, generally I would say more, annually. It depends on your age. If you're 20, you probably don't need blood work annually if you have no medical problems. But, like when you get in your 40s, you should probably have it done about once a year. Because I think I got my blood checked when I was in medical school, just because we had a free health fair wherever I was at the time. So I did it, but I hadn't had blood work done probably until I was probably when I started working here, because we had to for annual like employee labs. And so that's the only reason I get them, is because I got it for free. And then they kind of said, hey, you really should get this done. So it's like, okay, I'll do that. But yeah, I would say until you get in your 40s, or if you have a big predisposition, if you have a family history of certain entities that you need to really check out or be on point with, or whatever, or if you're having, endocrine dysfunction of whatever kind, you have to get a bunch of tests done for that. But really, once a year is probably suffice.
Yeah, I think I've literally gotten mine done twice in my life. A fasted full on blood panel. I'm sure the military might have done one at some point, but
I love how the military would never tell you. I feel like they took my blood all the time. They never say anything. I would always be like, well, I assume that's good, but I never saw any numbers on anything. I didn't know what my cholesterol was like, but they take my blood like every time I go in there. I'm like, what are we doing with that? I never.
Right.
Yeah, they always just say it's HIV, but I'm pretty sure they're testing for other stuff. And I did notice that when I got my blood talking last time, there was all kinds of numbers, and I did see the cholesterol and stuff, because that actually is high in my family as well. But a lot of hormones were missing too. So like with testosterone wasn't on there. I'm not sure if thyroid was, because I know that it's also bad in my family. So that's also something to, I guess, maybe you need to specially request for testosterone. I don't know if it's a different test, or they just need more blood, or what.
Well, usually they don't check that for any reason, unless you're a lot older, or if you're experiencing or exhibiting certain signs of either too high or too low testosterone. So yeah, that's not a general thing that they'll order. I mean, all you have to do is you just write it. I don't know, they can run it off. Like, I don't know if you ever watched them draw blood, but the colored tops are different, like on the blood tubes, and so they have different additives in there that'll keep it from clotting or whatever. So can't remember what color tube the testosterone is, but yeah, they won't just check that unless you're an elderly, maybe say 60s to 70-year-old male, and you're really low on energy or something. Like, oh, let's see if your testosterone's low, so you can get basically anabolic steroids legally from a doctor to up your testosterone if that's a problem. Or if females come in that are exhibiting signs of having grown facial hair, or things like that, they might have, hey, you might be making too much testosterone or something. They might check it then, but it's not a routine test that they check really ever that I can think of. So
good to know.
All right, last question. And this is a big one I've gotten a lot too over the years, so I'm glad that you're answering it and not me. Training when sick, what adjustments should be made?
And that's sort of a vague statement as well, as far as there's a lot of things you could do. It depends on your symptoms. I would say you just kind of go out and do what you feel like doing. If it's only going through like block zero, if you're using the programming that we have, or, just doing some really light cardio, get on a bike and just, sometimes if I'm feeling just really crappy, I'll get on the bike and just try to get a sweat going for 20 to 30 minutes, just to, I just usually feel better when I'm done doing that. If all you feel like is doing mobility, just do mobility. Push a lot of fluids. Don't worry about eating as much. Just really focus on hydration. You feel like running, go for a short run. Do a zone 2 for 20 to 30 minutes if you can. May want to be careful if you have a fever. Is it dangerous? No, not really. You're just elevating your body temp and increasing your metabolism when you're working out. So that might be more harmful for you. Just depends on how you really feel. With the whole COVID thing, a lot of people had shortness of breath. So if you're short of breath, walking to your gym probably shouldn't be out exercising a whole lot. I'd probably recommend resting on that. But again, it just depends on your illness. And again, this is all like, you're just aches and pains, nothing like super serious. Obviously, if you are worried about yourself, you should go to your doctor, go to the ER and get checked out. So I'm not saying blow off any of your medical complaints. It just depends on how you're feeling. But yeah, I mean, it won't hurt anything at all, really. If it's just a common cold or a virus, it might even actually help you to recover faster. But it just depends on you, and if you just like absolutely can't get out of bed, every single little joint hurts, that might be best just to skip, so.
Yeah. Normally I find out how sick I am if I do get sick when I go to work out. It'll be like, if I am trying to do something that's maybe a little bit more intense and I get extremely like overheated, like get too hot too fast, I kind of know like, okay, maybe that's not the best. So I kind of like go by feel. But I think what you're saying about zone 2, I feel like that's safe almost no matter what the illness is. It's just, I mean, it's basic human movement. And so beyond having something that's really serious, and you would know, right? I think we are talking probably about smaller, like cold and things like that. And if you have like a really bad flu or COVID, I doubt you're even going to want to get into the gym. I think if it's full blown and you have like a 104 fever, whatever the case is on some of these things, I doubt that you're going to want to move. But if you can, why not go for a walk?
Yeah, I mean, that walking is huge too. Just getting outside. Sometimes you do feel better if you've just been laying in bed for a day or two, just to get up and move a little bit and drink some fluids and see if you can just walk around the block or whatever. But if you walk to your mailbox and you're super winded, it's like maybe you should just walk around your house or something and just kind of wait. But again, it just depends on your medical history and all this stuff. There's a lot of variables, but for most of us that are fairly healthy, I would say, yeah, you can do it. Like I said, sometimes it'll help kick the illness a little bit faster. It just depends on how you feel, and different people have different entities that they have to deal with. So
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. I really do. And I think this has been awesome. Maybe something we can do again. But is there anything else that
For
you
sure.
feel that people need to know in general about medical professionals, about fitness, and in your medical opinion?
I mean, I could talk about that for a long time. So there's a ton of things that would be nice to be able to talk about. So hopefully we do get to do this again because I've really enjoyed it. But I mean, like I said earlier, the medical community, I really try to push focusing on, the main pillars that we talk about here, diet, exercise, nutrition, and sleep. And like I said, we just get zero training. I can't remember very many lectures that I received, like, exercise. I mean, none of it. All this exercise knowledge I have is from previous, when I was an athlete in high school and college. And then what I've learned, doing your programming and just learning on my own and doing bodybuilding and certified fitness trainer and stuff like that. So I've learned a ton on my own. And, and actually from the sleep aspect, we learned zero on sleep. And, when you guys talked about the book, Why We Sleep, by Matt Walker, I have third year medical students every month, and I actually buy them 2 books every month to keep. One of them is what's called Surgery Recall, which is like a general surgery kind of collection of pimp questions, basically, that you get asked on rotations. And the other one is Why We Sleep. I'm like, okay, this looks weird, but read this book. I was like, this is so important. I learned so many things that I didn't know, and we learned zero of it at medical school. So it's, maybe we had one lecture, but it's nothing compared to memorizing the Krebs cycle and ATP and mitochondria, just all these things that you don't really need anymore. But the big things for health in general, we don't focus on. We focus on disease, unfortunately. So, I feel that I really try to, preach to my patients about doing all these things. And I do incorporate in my practice. However, my practice population, a lot of them are a little bit sicker. And for me to say, okay, you need to quit smoking, you need to quit drinking, you need to exercise, you need to diet, you need to lose weight. Like, they're just like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That's way too much, And as you've talked about people don't like to be uncomfortable, and it's really hard to sell that, even just, and I tell people, it's like, hey, I have a lot of knowledge and passion for diet and exercise. If you want to dive into it, maybe make yourself feel better, I'll sit and talk to you for hours about this. But if you're not going to be committed, it's a lot of work for me. I'm not going to, I don't have time in a 15-minute time slot to talk about this, but you have to be committed. And most people are like, yeah, I'm good. I'll just, not feel good and keep doing everything and whatever. So it's, I wish there were more people that were focused on preventative health. And, it'd be nice if like insurances would say, hey, we'll pay for your gym membership. We'll pay for smoking cessation to try to save money down the road, which to me makes a lot of sense. There's a few actual places that do that, but they'll pay for gym memberships and they'll pay for whatever. But, to me, it's like you should prevent having to use people like us, as far as if you're healthier, then you won't need to see us as much and you'll save money. And it's just easier to go to McDonald's or Sonic or whatever fast food chain is near you to eat, and just go about your day and be on your phone. And, I don't want to go outside and walk. It's easier to sit and watch Netflix. So, but yeah, there's a lot of things that I would love to change and help change. And like I said, I'm always learning every day still too. If I'm not doing anything with my family, I'm trying to read and learn new things. And so that's really easy to do. And depending on what practice you're in, I mean, some people are like crazy busy, and I feel like I'm fairly busy too, but like there's some people that just, they work even more than me and they don't have time. They just literally, like, they're in a big city. They go to 4 different hospitals in the day. They've got to round, they've got to operate, they've got to do things, and they're in the car, and then they got to do charting and deal with billing and stuff. It's like you have very little time. So it's really hard to learn extra things, especially if you're not wired from the get-go to know what it is. They're just like, yeah, I don't know, just don't work out and go see somebody else. And again, this is not putting down any type of medical professional, but it's easier to do. It's like, oh, let's make it somebody else's problem. Go see physical therapy, depending on the physical therapist, whether they're good at doing that stuff or not. Some of them just do focus on rehab, and they don't do a lot about sports type of things. So you just really got to learn, kind of stemming back to who gets us, learning who will do that in the community. And so it's just kind of an ongoing issue, really. So
awesome. Well, again,
yeah.
I do appreciate your time, and I think I agree with everything that you just said. So we'll definitely do this again. We can hop into more questions and even bigger picture stuff. But
for sure.
Yeah, thanks for your time, and I look forward to doing it again.
You bet, man. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man.